October 1907, New York City trembles. Banks are collapsing. The stock market is in free fall. Crowds flood the streets, desperate to pull their money before it vanishes into the void. Fear spreads faster than fire. And at the center of it all, one man stands between survival and ruin. A banker named John Pierpont Morgan. In just a few days, he'll decide whether the American economy lives or dies. But how did it come to this? It began, as so many financial disasters do, with greed. A small mining firm called the United Copper Company tried to pull off an audacious play. Buy up every share of its own stock, squeeze the short sellers, and make the price skyrocket. But when the scheme collapsed, it didn't just sink United Copper. It set off a chain reaction that nearly destroyed the U.S. financial system. The price of United Copper plummeted overnight. Investors were ruined. The banks that had backed the operation began to panic. Confidence evaporated. The contagion spread across New York like a virus with no cure. One of the city's largest institutions, the Knickerbocker Trust Company, was hit first. Depositors rushed in by the thousands, demanding their savings. Within hours, the vaults were empty. Panic rippled across Wall Street. Stocks crashed. Interest rates soared. Businesses couldn't pay their workers. And for the first time in decades, the U.S. government found itself powerless. Theodore Roosevelt was in the White House, but the president might as well have been a world away. There was no central bank, no Federal Reserve to stabilize the economy. The Treasury lacked the funds to intervene. The entire system was seconds from total collapse. And that's when all eyes turned to one man. Not a politician, not a general, but a financier, JPMorgan. Born into wealth in 1837, Morgan had been bred for this very moment. His father, Junius Spencer Morgan, was one of London's most respected bankers. From childhood, John was taught that money wasn't just about wealth, it was about control. He studied mathematics in Switzerland, learned accounting in London, and by 25, he was already shaping the world's financial future. But J.P. Morgan wasn't like other bankers. He wasn't chasing profit. He was chasing power. He believed chaos was the enemy of progress. And in the fall of 1907, chaos had come to his doorstep. As the panic spread, America's biggest financiers scattered in confusion. Banks refused to lend to one another. Corporations couldn't make payroll. Even the U.S. Treasury hesitated. The nation needed leadership, and it didn't come from Washington. It came from 23 Wall Street, J.P. Morgan's private fortress in Lower Manhattan. Inside that dark, wood-paneled library, the fate of America would be decided. Morgan, 70 years old, silver-haired, with the presence of a monarch, gathered the country's most powerful bankers. The doors closed. The city outside spiraled into hysteria. And inside, one man quietly began to rebuild the nation's confidence, ledger by ledger, loan by loan. To some, he was salvation. To others, a tyrant. But everyone knew the same truth. J.P. Morgan was now the only man standing between Wall Street and oblivion. And what he decided next would change the course of American history forever. Inside J.P. Morgan's library, the air was thick with smoke, fear, and quiet defiance. The city outside was panicking, but within these marble walls, decisions were being made that would shape the destiny of a nation. Morgan stood at the head of the long mahogany table, his sharp eyes scanning the faces of the most powerful financiers in America. He didn't waste words. He studied balance sheets, questioned solvency, and made judgments with terrifying precision. Bankers begged for bailouts. Executives pleaded for mercy. But Morgan was cold, calculating. He decided who would live and who would fall. When the Knickerbocker Trust collapsed, Morgan simply said, "Let it fail." To him, trust wasn't given, it was earned. And panic, he believed, must be contained, not rewarded. For the other institutions teetering on the edge, he demanded unity. Rivals who had spent years trying to outmaneuver one another now found themselves locked in the same room, forced to cooperate under the will of a single man. For hours, Morgan directed them like a battlefield commander. He ordered banks to pool their reserves, pledge his own fortune to back emergency loans, and promised the press that stability was near, even when it wasn't. And slowly, the tide began to turn. But the true climax of the crisis came late one night when a major brokerage firm, Morgan Chase, stood on the brink of collapse. If it fell, the entire market could go down with it. At midnight, Morgan summoned the heads of every major bank back to his home. The men entered reluctantly, exhausted and fearful. Then, as the clock struck 12, Morgan locked the doors behind them. "That no one leaves," he said. "Until we have a solution." Hours passed. Tension thickened. Men whispered, argued, sweated. The weight of the nation's economy hung in the room like a noose. Finally, near dawn, Morgan emerged with a plan, a coordinated rescue. The banks would inject millions into the markets collectively, propping up firms and restoring confidence. It was radical. It was desperate, and it worked. By sunrise, the deal was sealed. When Wall Street opened that morning, fear had begun to fade. The panic, for now, was over. JP Morgan had done what the US government could not. With nothing but reputation, intelligence, and willpower, he had stopped a financial collapse. For the first time in American history, the economy had been saved, not by Washington, but by a single private banker. The nation breathed again. Crowds outside cheered Morgan's name. Newspapers hailed him as a hero. But in quiet corners of power, a darker thought began to grow. If one man could save the system, then one man also had the power to destroy it. In the weeks that followed, JP Morgan became the most powerful man in America, more powerful, some whispered, than the president himself. He had restored faith in the markets, but at a cost. Now, the entire financial system seemed to orbit around one man's judgment. From his fortress at 23 Wall Street, Morgan began shaping the economy with surgical precision. He controlled vast networks of railroads, steel, electricity, and finance. Entire industries bent to his will. His firm, JP Morgan & Co., became the engine of American capitalism, and Morgan, its architect. When railroads fell into chaos, he reorganized them. When corporations battled for dominance, he merged them. When industries ran short of credit, he personally financed them. Each deal made him richer, but more importantly, it made him indispensable. His influence stretched from the stock exchange to the White House. Presidents came and went, but JP Morgan remained. By 1901, his power reached its peak. He orchestrated the creation of US Steel, the world's first billion-dollar corporation. By merging America's biggest steel producers under one empire, newspapers called him a genius. Critics called him a monopolist. To some, he was the guardian of order. To others, a tyrant in a banker's suit. But even his allies began to wonder how much power was too much. Morgan could move markets with a single word. He could destroy competitors with a single phone call. His control over credit and commerce was absolute and invisible. America had been built on the promise of democracy, but its economy now bowed to a man unelected, unaccountable, and unstoppable. And yet, Morgan didn't see himself as a villain. To him, stability justified everything. He once told a journalist, "I owe the public nothing beyond keeping the system alive." He believed that without discipline, without men like him, the economy would devour itself. But Washington was watching. Politicians, journalists, and reformers began asking the same dangerous question: should one man hold this much power over a nation's fate? The answer would come soon, in the form of a new system that would change global finance forever. A system born not from democracy, but from fear of another panic. And ironically, the man who saved America in 1907 had just inspired the creation of the one institution, designed to make sure no one like him could ever rise again. When the panic of 1907 finally faded, JP Morgan was hailed as the man who saved capitalism. But behind the applause came a rising unease, the realization that one private citizen had done what an entire government could not. The newspapers called him a hero, Congress called hearings, and the public called for change. In 1912, a Senate investigation, known as the Puyo Committee, began digging into the secret web of influence that connected Wall Street's biggest firms. What they uncovered was astonishing. Through interlocking directorships, Morgan controlled or influenced more than a third of the nation's total banking resources. His reach extended into railroads, utilities, manufacturing, and even politics. America's financial bloodstream ran through his veins. The findings shocked the country. Even Morgan himself, now in his mid-70s, seemed weary of the power that had defined him. When asked by a congressman whether credit depended on money or character, he famously replied, "The first thing is character, before money or anything else." It was a glimpse into the mind of a man who saw finance not as greed, but as discipline. Or still, the fear of another panic forced Washington to act. In 1913, just months after Morgan's death, Congress created the Federal Reserve System, a central bank designed to do officially what JPMorgan had done privately: stabilize markets, manage credit, and prevent collapse. The Federal Reserve became the institutional legacy of one man's power, a permanent monument to both his genius and the danger he represented. That same year, on a spring morning in Rome, JPMorgan died in his sleep at the age of 75. When word reached New York, the stock exchange closed its doors in mourning, an honor reserved for presidents and kings. His estate was worth hundreds of millions, but the real measure of his wealth lay in the system he had shaped. Without him, the panic of 1907 might have destroyed the U.S. economy. With him, it survived and transformed. He was called a robber baron, a savior, a tyrant, and a patriot. But perhaps JPMorgan was something simpler, a man who understood that money, when wielded without restraint, could destroy nations, yet when controlled, could hold them together. More than a century later, every time the Federal Reserve intervenes to calm markets, every time the government steps in to save a collapsing bank, the shadow of JPMorgan lingers. Because in that dark library at 23 Wall Street, he didn't just save the system. He showed the world who truly holds power when the economy trembles. JPMorgan didn't just shape American finance. He defined it, proving that sometimes the fate of a nation isn't decided in a courtroom or a battlefield.